I see we've got a few questions coming through. You've got Q&A on the bottom and chat as well. So be sure and drop us whatever questions you have there. One of the things we're going to talk about, again, going back to some of the basics. I know most of the questions we've got, a lot of them actually are on digiscoping, which is, of course, one of the most popular and perhaps the most misunderstood aspects we have of optics. But we've given 4 in a row on those, so we're going to try and give some equal time to the other stuff, in particular like our binoculars. But we will indeed be answering some of those questions as well, just to let you know. So, you know, one of the things that popped up in the New York Times, and you guys probably saw this as well, is this article that was running around yesterday about how, thanks to, you know, what's going on in all of our lives, people are starting to become a little more aware of what's surrounding them, you know, and bird watching in particular, in and around your backyard, or you know, even through the window, has become a more popular situation. So to that end, a lot of people are discovered it for the first time, maybe getting their first pair of binoculars. So I want to talk a little bit about the use of binoculars, in particular, some fieldcraft for those that are just kicking off on this. One of the things that I see a lot, having led tours, you know, my whole adult life, is people that are doing this move, saying, I can't find the bird. And there's a real simple couple things you can do here when you're using a pair of binoculars. One of those is you see the bird with your naked eye, and the thing that most people will do is they'll look down into the binoculars and kind of raise their head with them at first. What you really want to do is just stay focused on your subject, and you just kind of interrupt your vision with the binoculars, and you'll find that, boom, you'll find what you're looking at every single time. It's real simple, very intuitive, but it's a very common mistake that people that are beginning with binoculars at least, struggle with a lot. So again, I see my subject here. All I've got to do is just raise the binoculars to block my line of sight, and lo and behold, it's perfectly centered. One of the other things is the old chicken wing, as I like to call it, technique. You know, just actually physically holding your binoculars. And I'm going to have to change this a tiny bit here so you can see this. So a lot of times people do this and they hold their arms straight out, you know, like they call the chicken wing. And that will cause you a lot of fatigue and make it so that you'll shake more, and it makes it harder to hold the binoculars still. A better way is to bring your arms closer together and tuck them in against the side of your body. And that will give you a little more stability and cause less fatigue. One of the other things you definitely want to do if you're just starting with binoculars, and again, we'll move past this fairly quickly, but I want to give fair time to everybody, is setting the diopter. Now, the diopter is a separate control that is slave to the right barrel that allows you to be able to have both eyes perfectly in focus at the same time. And the way that you go about adjusting the diopter, first you're going to focus, you're going to cover the right barrel, because that one you want to do second. You're going to focus your system looking through the left eye like this, get it in focus. Then you're going to look at the same subject with your right eye, and you're going to twist this ring on the right barrel back and forth, okay, until the subject appears in focus in the right barrel as well. So you focus the system with the wheel, then you adjust the right eye to match the left eye, which is already in focus. On these little binoculars, it's on the right barrel. Others will be locking mechanism. We've got a couple others that are on the distal end of the hinge, or sometimes it's even built into, in some cases, your binoculars may be built into the focus system. You have to snap this out and then twist the focus ring with that out to adjust the right eye. But that's adjusting the diopter. With that set, you should be able to get a good view through both eyes. What do we got for questions? Do we have anything cropping up there?
Yeah, there's several out there that we got popped right away. So let's go to G. Lee. He had a couple questions right off the start. And the first one was, how do you determine the equivalent focal length of your digiscoping setup as far as an 883 to your camera? And then also, what would be some advantages of digiscoping with the camera lens just versus connection to the body directly?
Okay, to that end, I've got a couple different things from last week's seminar. Simon Brumby, of course, covered a lot of this last week in the webinar that we had on the deep dive with Simon Brumby, deep dive into digiscoping. But quickly, your equivalent focal length. Now, digiscoping, for those that don't know, we have to go back a little, I think. And pardon me why. Digiscoping essentially is attaching a camera or phone behind the eyepiece of usually a spotting scope like this to achieve massive focal lengths. Since this is not technically a digiscoping talk, we have to explain that so everyone knows what we're talking about quickly. And in this case, here's a phone adapter that I've got, okay, and it has a ring that's dedicated to this eyepiece that would get mounted on behind here, and it allows me to shoot pictures through this system. Now, the way that you calculate equivalent focal length, and for those that don't understand what that means, basically that is the equivalent of magnification in camera lens, okay? You would take the focal length of the lens that you're shooting through. In this case, I've got an iPhone 11. It has a 28 millimeter prime lens, or the 2X lens, which is about 56 millimeter, and you'd multiply that literally by the power of magnification on the eyepiece. So the eyepiece, in this case, is a 25 to 60x wide angle zoom, and we can twist that back and forth to go from 25 power to 60 power, and we would multiply the magnification on the eyepiece by the focal length of the lens that you have behind the eyepiece, and it's just that simple. As far as shooting with a lens, I suppose an easier thing to do, most of our experts do tend to agree that, let me share the screen with you a moment. Go back and find the right slide. That shooting with a lens is through the spotting scope is more advantageous than shooting without. And we have both systems, and probably Rob might show some of those setups in a little bit. But for all intensive purposes, we find that with the cameras, be it DSLR or micro four thirds, you know, mirrorless type system, that people seem to be getting more preferable images using the lens, because the lens allows you to do a couple things. It gives you more magnification. It allows you to select on aperture mode, and as you can see down here, trick the camera into allowing a faster shutter speed, so you can stop motion more effectively. And it's also a better match, because the curved lens of an eyepiece is designed to project onto the curved lens of an eye. So it probably is a little better fit on the curved front edge of a lens than on a flat sensor. Rob, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, some of the things to consider is if you're using, particularly if you're using the PA7, which is the method where you would just simply have the body only straight onto the sensor, onto the spotting scope. If you're using, you've got to consider crop factors as well. So if you're a micro four thirds user, your minimum focal length is going to be 2000 millimeters at this point. Whereas if you're a full frame user, it'd be 1000 mil. Now, 2000 millimeter takes some controlling. There's a lot of factors that come into to take effect, such as the light, the shutter speed. If you're not getting a fast shutter speed at 2000 millimeter, you're going to have blurred images. So that's where the using the pancake lens, like the micro four thirds users tend to use a 20 mil, that has the effect of reducing the focal length and allowing more light, because you're using an f1.8 fast lens, and the lens and the camera is seeing what your eye would see. So that's why particularly micro four thirds users tend to go for that pancake lens setup. Whereas if you're a full frame user, I mean, I use a Sony mirrorless camera. I use the PA7. It's really simple. Sony T2 ring here, straight onto the body, 1000 mil on the full frame. And because the full frame, the Sony cameras they're so good at controlling noise. I can have a fast ISO and be shooting as 1,000th of a second. It's 1000 mil, no problem.
Okay. Rob Wilson, you have anything you want to add to that, or?
No, I think Rob covered it pretty well. So
Usually
yeah.
does. Good.
But I do have a question for Mr. Rob Wilson and Wilton. We had a question from Andy on our Q&A that said he's doing digiscoping and it seems like his video is always better than his stills. Why would that be, and how can we get that to break even?
Shall I go first, Rob, with my opinion?
Yeah, give your yeah.
Yeah. If you're using, if it's, I'm not sure exactly what setup, maybe PA7 or whatever, but the video is a lot more forgiving because you won't notice quite so much the shutter speed, and that you can take a video can go down as low as perhaps 25, 26 frames per second, which is allowing a lot more light in. So that, you know, when you're shooting in standard photo mode, you've got to have a fast shutter speed to freeze the motion. Whereas the video, if it's running at 25 to 30 frames per second, that's letting a lot of light in. It's a lot more forgiving. That's, and then so in the ISO, you can adjust the ISO, you can adjust the frame rate of the video. I know exactly where he's coming from with that, because I often find that if I'm out shooting stills and video, the video always looks crisp and better somehow. But I think it's down to, because you can slow that frame rate down, you can get the optimum settings.
Yeah, and plus the eye is just more forgiving with video because there's motion involved, and even when you look at, you know, professional, well done, you know, National Geographic style video, if you watch it closely, you'll notice that the focus does go in and out because, you know, they're shooting very extreme focal lengths as we are, and they're just shooting, you know, fast animals, so the eye's just more forgiving when you see the motion going, and then, you know, the motion kind of interferes with what you're seeing. So you're seeing motion, and you know, a lot of times there's audio over it. So it's just more forgiving visually to the eye than a still photograph that you're just staring at, you know, right there on the screen. You notice whether it's sharp immediately or it's not. So that's the reason. And like Rob said, you know, it's just the video will always look better than the stills. I come from a still photography background, and that's my profession. And I really didn't start doing a whole lot of video until I started phone scoping, of all things. And it just blew me away that the phone can produce such crisp imagery through the scope. So the video will always look better.
The other thing is, as well, as because of the crop factor of the video, very often if you're using your smartphone or even a camera, you'll have a lot of vignetting that you might need to optically zoom past or use a different lens. But with video, because it's 1920 1080, it's a crop, it eliminates that, which means you don't need quite so much magnification on your spotting scope, which again, every time you zoom up, you're pushing the boundaries of what the equipment's capable of with shutter speeds and motion blur and that kind of thing. So that crop, if you notice the next time you're out digiscoping with your phone, go from taking a still to a video, and you'll see how the image changes, the crop factor of the video. So you don't need to zoom in quite so much on your eyepiece then.
Yeah, and most digiscopers come at it from a still photography approach, you know, and they're photographers or they're birders, and they just want to take a snap of a picture that, you know, either high quality if you're a professional or you want to get good results using digiscoping. But I really encourage everybody to experiment more with video. I'm hoping that Simon Brumby is going to do kind of a video for dummies, because I'm just blown away by the fact that that it still just cracks me up that I'm promoting phone video, you know, and coming from such a hardcore still background. I just always laughed at videographers. I've always had a running battle with them. You know, it's like that they didn't have to really pay any attention because it's just motion all the time. You know, and it was always kind of a joke and everything. But now I'm just finding myself enjoying video so much better because it's so easy with the phone. the camera also, but it's a little more involved, a little more difficult. But it's pretty brainless on, you know, you just put your phone on and you come back with this incredible 4K video that is broadcast quality, which, you know, I've had some stuff included in some broadcast projects.
Yeah.
So, you know, don't forget about the video. And then the slow motion video also. So take advantage of the video, start playing with that a little more. And I think you probably like it a lot.
Another thing that, if I may, just quickly add, and not really go into detail, but if you go back and check out the recording on our YouTube page, it's youtube.com/user/Kowa Sport Optics. You can find all of that. We've got 100 plus. But the the webinar we presented on phone scoping has graphic examples of how to troubleshoot an image when you're looking at to find out what's wrong with it. You know, by looking at the image, you can be a photo detective. So we covered that very well there. I won't do it again today because we'll be out of time for this whole webinar. But you can go back and check that out because sometimes, you know, you may need to find out what's going on. Chances are, though, it's light and motion blur, right?
Yeah,
Who
so
else
jumping
we got? Bunch more.
to that, yeah, I know. We've got, there's still several questions on here, if you guys don't mind. You know, Scott, he's just looking for the best iPhone to pair for his 55 millimeter. I mean, you know, I think anything in the newer models is going to just do you fine.
Yeah.
There's not really constraints with it. You know, any of them will work. We have adapter rings for that, so don't concern yourself with that one. You know, as the phones get better, you know, the cameras get better, but you can still get great images. Like, you know, some of us use older iPhones specifically just for shooting with, as opposed to, you know, going and laying out $1,200 for the top of the line one. You can still get awesome images from a 6 or a 4 even.
Yeah. I always, my advice is always go from the 5S onwards, and you just can't go wrong because things really started to. I mean, I still shoot with the iPhone SE Generation 1 purely because I like the compact size of it. A3 prints. We've printed them off. We've presented them at shows, and it's come off an iPhone 5S, which is, I don't know how many years old that is now. But people are still blown away that, you know, they think it's come off a €4,000 or €5,000 DSLR body.
If I may, though, I will be the sour one that tends to disagree. As we saw with point and shoot cameras, as we're seeing with DSLRs and the phones, the newer the phone, absolutely the better the camera is. And the other real innovation is the cameras with the 2X lenses that have the ability to give the 2X. That offers an enormous advantage in phone scoping, because now you can get double the magnification with all the light coming in without having to run the optical zoom up, so you can maintain that faster shutter speed at more magnification and get much better results. So I am a fan for looking at something with that 2X lens if you can, one of the newer ones. All right.
Hey, Jeff, just so you know, Andrew had some pretty specific questions regarding the iPhone with the the phone scope adapter, and he wanted to just know about different settings and whatnot. I'm going to blast him over your email address so he can reach out to you directly.
Sure.
So he has that. You could see his questions in the Q&A part, and go ahead and get him sorted on that, because that looks to be right up your alley. He's using the same phone, same setup, same everything. So
Perfect. Yeah, that's easy.
So while we're on the 55 as well, Andrea had asked, she's currently using it with her iPhone 8, but she wants to look to get a compact camera, and she's just starting to begin with photography, and wanted to know if there was any recommendations. She said specific compact camera. Are we still doing the compact camera thing here?
I would forget compact camera. You're going to get just as good results on your iPhone. Yeah. I mean, I would just perhaps, if I was going to, because you bought a scope that's small, so you want to keep. I wouldn't suggest sticking a great big SLR body on the back. But if you want to upgrade, then the only thing I would recommend is perhaps a Micro Four Thirds or a mirrorless, like a Sony mirrorless camera or something like that.
Mhm.
So then you would just have a DA20 adapter and a T2 ring for the camera model. But to be honest, with an iPhone 8 and a 553, you know, you're going to get good results from that setup anyway.
I've got another question from John on our Facebook feed asking. He says got the 883 in the zoom, and when I run up my zoom above 30x or so, I'm losing a lot of quality. Is this the norm or just the heat haze? Who'd like to take that one? I mean, I've got anybody? I'll grab it if not.
Well, I mean that you shouldn't lose. I mean, if is it the 20 to 60 jet or 25 to 60?
25 to 60, yeah.
25 to 60. I mean, that eyepiece is phenomenal right the way through. So, I mean, heat haze does have a big effect, doesn't it, on the optical quality, sort of the atmospherics. But in terms of using it at 60 times, you shouldn't be having any problem. So I would suggest perhaps it's either some kind of problem. I mean, we digiscope all the time with the phones at 60 times, and it you know, that eyepiece is one of the few eyepieces on the market that which does perform so well at 60 times. So to me, it sounds like maybe there's a problem, or yeah, it could be if there is a lot of heat haze, then I mean that does destroy.
And that's the other thing to tell. The only way to really know is to physically go out and test from the same spot at different times of the day. Generally speaking, in the morning, you know, in the morning time, you tend to have clearer air. You know, so compare what it's like midday, morning, evening, and see, you know, if you're noticing any difference. That would be the only thing, you know, sort of a physical test to see if you're noticing differences at different times of day.
The other thing too, though, well, one point, Jeff, when it comes to that, when people start zooming, the people that have the most problem with that are the people that don't have a sufficient tripod. Because, you know, as you start zooming, and that I always find that's part of the problem with people that come to me. They just don't have a you know, the less stable the tripod you have, it'll work at 25, but then once you start zooming, you start having focus problems.
Right. Another question that we had is talking about just the basic usage of spotting scopes as a whole, and getting out of, you know, the more specifics of digiscoping, which is kind of the extreme end, and bringing it back out of the weeds into the real basics. One thing that someone's talking about is they're having a hard time using an angled scope and finding their subject, right? So it is a little bit more counterintuitive to have a 45-degree angled scope like this, where you're looking down to view a subject that's ahead of you. And so there are a couple tricks that you can use here. We have the sunshade on the outside of all the scopes. This is our 883, TSN 883. And you can pull that out. And if you rotate it down, you can see there's this nice notched groove there. I think you can see it there, maybe, hopefully. And that's designed so that you can kind of peer down the side of the scope when it's on the tripod and use that, line it up with your target in the distance, and then pop on the scope. But there are some other things that you can do because that's a very specific thing. Same thing with the sort of drinking straw type, you know, viewfinder, tube viewfinders. They still require you get down in there and then move. So my friend Rafael Galvez, he's a good friend, excellent birder. He guides professionally for tours all over the world, but he also runs the Florida Keys Hawk Watch. He had a trick where he just took an oversized, a long tie wrap, you know, like a zip tie, if you will, and he ran it through there, and he left the long tail sticking up, straight up like this. And he would then stand behind the scope and put that tail just to the right of whatever subject it was, when he's doing with flying hawks, as an example, that are moving, sort of as a quick guide, and then he just drop down like that. You could go from here to here, and found that was a much easier way. And another trick But the more you practice, and if you do something like that, the better you're going to get to it getting lined up. And you'll find after a while, you can almost kind of shoot from the hip, if you will, just kind of swing that thing around to where you think it should be and look in there. And if you use your scope enough, you'll get to the point where that becomes almost second nature.
And don't forget about that lens shade. I meet so many people that didn't even know it was there, and it's really important to keep stray light out. So if you've got this, especially the set, and it keeps the rain off your lens. So, but it's really important to use that. And I know so many people that they don't even think about it. And even for just looking through the scope, it's just stray light coming in, and it will affect the quality of the image.
So if you're looking at it, what Robert's talking about, if we're looking into the sun as an example, the sun's at a low angle coming across like this, you can just pull that out and it shades that lens, so you're not going to get a flare like you can see there, when you get a reflection of light in there. So that'll just allow you to get a little shade on that. Good point.
So while you guys are, I mean, it's slightly on topic because it's still the sun and glare and things like that. But there was several questions regarding glare, going back to a little bit for the digiscoping aspect of things. When your phone's hooked up, like you use an angled scope, Jeff. You're in Florida; it's sunny all the time. I can't. I'm in Michigan. So when your phone's up there, how do you deal with it when you're trying to shoot when you're in the field and there's glare all the time?
Well, yeah. Let me talk about that. I think in particular that question, if I'm reading it, is dealing with reflected light off of the surface. And again, this is something we covered in the webinar, and I did make a slide here. If you give me the levity, just share screen momentarily. I can demonstrate this, I think, more effectively by looking at this. So if we look at this slide as an example, you can see this is an example of glare bouncing off the surface of the lens. You can see you've got a hot spot here, and you can see the reflection of the branches up above you. What that is usually from, that's generally the person that's seeing that is using sort of a generic universal phone adapter rather than an adapter that is designated for use on a specific phone and a specific eyepiece, as you have over here. You can see on the graphic on the right side of this graphic that this is one of our Kowa adapters, and you can see that it's mated so that there's no light getting through because it's perfectly centered on that eyepiece with a cup that completely shades the eyepiece, so there's no reflection. People that are getting glare on the top are usually using a universal adapter, like a clamp style adapter or something that isn't fit to your phone and allows the light to leak through. So the best thing to do, in my opinion, is get another adapter, something like the Kowa adapters, or if you have a 2-lens phone, you want to utilize that second lens. Phone Scope makes a really great set of adapters as well that will accommodate both lenses, but it will make it so that you don't have to worry about the sun reflecting off the top. Now, if you have an older phone or you can't find a suitable adapter, and that's why you're using a universal style adapter, then there are ways, but you're gonna have to do creative things like shade the with your hand over the top of it. It becomes a lot more that you have to do, and it kind of keeps you from being able to take pictures effectively. So my opinion or suggestion would be to purchase a different style adapter that utilizes that more effectively. That it's designed specific for that phone on that eyepiece to reduce the variability that you're seeing.
Yeah.
A little something here.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it's funny because I've done hundreds and hundreds of training with people, and that Hoodman Loop that I know you're not crazy about because you're more of a birder. But if you're a photographer that wants to use digiscoping as a professional photography tool, it's just another lens, another tool. And, photographers are finally figuring it out and discovering that. But the Hoodman Loop, if we could show that, Rob, do you have a loop that we could show just to show people?
Yeah.
So to me, that is the most important piece of equipment in digiscoping, more than the scope, more than the adapter, more than the phone, because critical focus is the hardest problem in digiscoping because of such limited depth of field. And, you know, the fact that you're shooting at such extreme focal lengths. If I wear something similar to that, the one I have is not nearly that big or heavy. The one I use is a Hoodman Loop. It's a pretty standard photography tool that's been used forever. I mean, I've been using them forever, even before I digiscoped. And what that does is I just wear that around my neck. And when I use a camera, I have an even more professional loop that's made by a company called Zuccato out of, I think that's how you pronounce it, out of Switzerland. And that is made to directly attach to my GH4. So I put something similar to that that just goes right on my camera. It stays on my camera. I don't shoot through the eyepiece. When I first started digiscoping, I'm a photographer that shot through eyepieces. I never shot off the back of a camera ever in my career. And so it blocks the light. And then on cameras, there's a button on most cameras that will zoom the view on the back of your screen to 10x. And then you're able to move that around. So when I've got that on the camera, I'm looking at a high res magnified image of the back of the camera screen. I can zoom in 10x and I can zoom back and forth so that I can see the full frame. And then I zoom in 10x and I go right to the eyeball and I focus on the eyeball. And your critical focus will increase from 20% to 95%, I guarantee, if you use it. And like I say, I use that with the camera that attaches, and I use the loop with the phone that I wear around my neck, and I hold it just slightly above the screen. It blocks the light, and I can see the feather detail, and it improves your success rate so much using that loop. And I tell people over and over and over, I tell them the first thing out of my mouth when I do a workshop is, and I laugh about it, that this is your most important piece of equipment. And then I emphasize that, and everybody goes away. And the few people, you know, it's one of those extra pieces of gear that cost a little bit of money. It's a little bit of a bother, but it's just saves so much grief in my mind. So, you know, just get a loop and use it and get used to using it, and you'll be a lot happier. And it'll solve a lot of problems.
Right.
Well, I'll second that, because I think very often it's down to what if you're serious, if you really want to get into digiscoping, it depends what camera you've got. I mean, I bought a Blackmagic cinema camera because I wanted to get really into doing the video and stuff, and it was virtually outdoors on a bright day with the scope. It was virtually impossible to use, but I bought this. I think it was about €90 or something, and the difference that made was just unreal, absolutely unreal. And so if you're serious about digiscoping, it's definitely worth considering. You can buy them. You can get a specific magnetized mount for whichever camera you use. So this is a universal loop, but they have different mounts that stick onto the end of the loop and will go around the screen. So yeah, I'll just want to second what Robert was saying there.
Yeah, and you know, and I realize that, you know, a lot of birders don't want to mess with it, to include my good friend Mr. Bowden, but he's a birder, you know, so he wants to get, and he does amazingly well with it. I don't, you know, I'm a lot older than he is, so I think my eyesight's not as good as his, but you know, so he doesn't want to mess with it, and I understand that. But if like Rob said, if you seriously want to use it as a photography tool and get good results, get a loop.
Let me cut this off. Let's not get in the weeds with digiscoping, because we do have a lot of non-digiscoping questions, and we've given 4 digiscoping webinars in a row. So, I mean, I don't want to just spend the whole time on that if we can, guys.
Okay.
The one thing that I had here is people are asking about tripods. And although we don't sell tripods, what I do have here, I wanted to share a screen quickly because there have been a number of tripod questions. Hold on a second. Share screen. Gotta be smarter than the. So once again, going back to Simon's webinar. Here we go. From the other day. Here's about a 10-minute video that he has, an interview with a gentleman that is a Benro rep that was working for Manfrotto before that he has up on his YouTube page, Go Digiscoping with Simon Brunby. I'm going to try and pop this into the chat for everyone to see as well. But if not, you can just go to YouTube and look up, search for Go Digiscoping, and you'll be able to find this video up there. But it's a really good, informative video from a gentleman that's been in the business a long time, talking about all the aspects of tripods. We here at Kowa, we don't really make those, and we could go on and on, but probably better to pass that on to one of the professionals. I'm going to type that in here, hopefully. There we go. What else we got? Sorry, I'm trying to monitor 3-4 different things. You got another one handy?
Yeah.
Paul?
Yeah, I mean, go back to there's a couple good ones that I love the do-it-yourselfer one, and we'll put you guys to test here and say, you have any do-it-yourself tricks for digiscoping with a point and shoot?
With the 10 times optical zoom, I would say don't bother. You're just going to have a world of pain with that. With anything with digital compact cameras, the optimum was always between like a 3 or 4 times optical zoom, and trying to line that up. Yes, you can make some kind of tube or whatever to hold it in place, but the problem is the lens moves backwards and forwards when it's trying to focus. You see, so generally I would say give up and buy an iPhone or buy a used. If you just want to just try out some digiscoping, just get a phone off the internet, and you don't have to use it as a phone. The days of compact camera digiscoping have gone, really. That's how we all did. That's what we've all been brought up on. We all did it for years, and it was great fun, and it was a challenge to get the 2 objective lenses lined up, and you were always buying the next camera, which had a lens inside the body, so it didn't affect the lineup with the eyepiece. But to be honest, I mean, I guess, well, certainly in the UK and Europe, as we get very few inquiries about compact cameras now. It's either predominantly smartphone or it's a DSLR.
Yeah. That said, though, going back to what Simon said last week, very often you start with what you have as well. And again, if it's like a 10x optical zoom and it's something that you're using as a bridge camera to take pictures with, it's just not going to function behind the eyepiece. No. It's not worth utilizing. But if you have something with a 3, 4, 5x zoom, it may work. And I'm trying to remember, it's been long enough. Do we still carry the one adapter that you
need a DA4 and a DA10.
Okay.
And if it's got a 3 or 4 times optical zoom, that will do the trick.
Thank you.
Obviously, it's nowhere near as simple as a DSLR or a smartphone, but it is possible. I don't know whether I've got on my screen a picture of it.
It's in there somewhere in that deck, but I don't have it handy. I wasn't prepared for that one. In the meantime, while you're looking for that, let me go to another question that I do have
I've got it now.
Slide for. I got it?
Yep. Do you want me to share my screen?
Go ahead.
Just bear with me a brief second.
Right.
Share screen. Here we go. Share. So yeah, but basically, so there is a solution. It as you can see there, it takes a few different components. So your eye relief cap unscrews from the eyepiece, and then you use an inner ring of an adapter called the DA10, and then the DA4, which is the adapter you can see at the end, that fits on over the DA10, and then you have an adjustable plate where you can move left and right and up and down, so that you can get the lens of your compact camera properly lined up with the lens of the eyepiece, and then you can adjust the distance. So it is doable. It is doable.
All right.
It's just whether you want to do it. It's you have to weigh up the benefits and the disadvantages really of whether you want to go down that route.
Right. And another good point from Steve Sosensky with Optics for Birding had pointed out that Paul Sayas Digadapter, which is one of the ones that Simon also recommended as a third-party alternative, is a great solution as well. So you could reach out to them at Optics for Birding probably, and they can help you with that. Let me quickly, there's another one here, just talking about someone talking about having difficulties using their spotting scope with the case. And I think I know what's going on here. So I want to share something very quickly, and I have a slide prepared for that because it came in advance. If we look at this, so we have two types of cases for the Kowa scopes. The one here is our carrying cases, our CNW11 for the angled scope, and for the straight scopes, the CNW12. They're more of sort of an oversized bag, okay? They're a little bit less expensive than our fitted scopes cases down here, but they are a little more clunky because they are oversized and not as easy to use. One thing you may want to consider if this is what you're talking about and having difficulties with, especially with the big zipper that you described, I'm assuming this is the one, is pay a little bit extra, but move up to our fitted cases, which fit very nicely and cleanly over top of the scope tightly. So it's a lot easier to get on and off, and a lot more user-friendly for a little more money. And then instead of the little handle like this that you carry it with, it comes with a shoulder strap that would clip on to either side, so you can sling it over your shoulder when you're done. And I'll stop share. That was, I think, the answer to that one. I've got another one that I'd like to bounce off to actually quickly. One person had asked about, and I missed it, and it's dawned on me after the fact, brought me down a different, was complaining about every time they shoot their images, they come out with sort of the brown, a brownish, they said shadowing, which threw me off for a long time. And I'm thinking, well, it could be alignment, it could be this, but you know, the one thing I forgot to mention is very often you get films on your lens of your phone here, and especially on the spotting scope. If you've ever even parked your car by the coast, and you come back to it and you can't see through the windshield because you've got all the salt spray, sort of this greenish, brownish haze on there, and you hit it with the wipers, you can still see on the outside edge, it's still there. The same is true with your optics. Very often, if you use them in a coastal environment in particular, if you forget to wash them, and usually it takes a little water, that outer edge, when you look through it, you may notice that things look a little discolored. It can be greenish or brownish. So that's something to bear in mind. And, from a standpoint of just basic care, what we would typically do, and if I may, pull off my I've got a little lint-free lens cloth that I always keep on my binocular strap all the time, ready to go. That just pulls out. And sometimes I'll have a brush with me as well, but if you don't have that, you can use gravity as your friend and gently brush off any sand, dirt, grit, whatever you have. I may then also give a little huff of air, do the same, and then make sure that there's not any debris on there that I'm going to grind on and scratch the lenses. And then just, again, I like to tip them down, because then, again, gravity becomes your friend if you do dislodge something. And then with kind of lifting semicircular motions, you can twist back and forth on these lenses to clean them. If you still have an issue, like, again, it's a salt spray and you'll feel it if you go on a pelagic trip or something, like Alvaro was talking about. When you come back, your binocular, you'll feel it, it's sticky, and it's the same on the lens. You're gonna need a little warm water generally on that to get that off. If that doesn't work, I'll move to a very mild sort of a dish soap like Dove or something. You can rub it right on there, rinse it off, put them down in the sink, shake them off, and then dry them off like we talked about before. And as a last resort, one of these sort of alcohol-based, optically approved cleaners, if you really need to, there's something really greasy or sticky that you can't get off, but do that as a last worst case resort. Okay, got that one done. What else have we got, guys?
Yeah, we got I mean, there's still quite a bit in the Q&A here, but a lot of personalized questions, and please, everybody, feel free to reach out to us. I apologize if we can't get to each one individually, but just reach out to us at customerservice@kowa.com, and depending on the question, you know, we'll get it over to whoever need be to get you the best answer possible right away. We appreciate all the questions. We welcome them. It's just a lot of it. It's hard to get to all of it. There was someone that had mentioned much earlier on it, any thoughts on using gimbals?
Probably that's going to be one that only Robert has interest in. Again, that's more of a photographer thing. And if you're using it as a birder, absolutely not. It's no way. And you know, it goes back to what Simon had talked about too. And I'm going to go off on a tangent and then hand it over to Robert. But you remember Simon? He's a videographer by trade. He's going out and shooting, but you know, he's a big guy. He's 6'5". What is he? I mean, he's a big muscular guy, and he's recommending using these monster tripods that go all the way up without a center column. You know, he's probably carrying a 12-pound tripod. You know, and I, on the other hand, I carry this around, 3.5-pound Gitzo I've been using for 10 years. So we have a complete opposite approach to this thing with a smooth pan video head. And the reason for that is I don't need that extra height. I'm using an angle scope and keeping it down. And for me, I've got a back injury and I'm carrying my spotting scope all day long. So again, I do a very different thing. So there's going to be an extreme difference on opinion on this as to your use and balancing your expectation with your ease and comfort of use on a tripod. And it's just like binocular selection. It's the same thing. Or even when someone selects like a 550 scope or a small compact scope versus the heavier 88, you know, it's going to function a little bit less. You're giving up some functionality, but it becomes infinitely easier to use. But with that said, Robert, you want to take off on gimbal?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
the gimbals don't work as well. I get that question a lot. A lot of the photographers that I deal with, you know, have gimbals for use with their high-end gear. You really want to use a fluid motion video head. And the one reason I do like phones so much anymore is the fact that I use two different tripods when I go out. I have a heavy-duty heavier tripod that I use when I use my camera because it's much more stable and it's able to handle the camera weight much better. And then when I use a phone, I use a smaller tripod. But one thing like that's really important is get the best tripod that you can afford. I just see so many people buying these beautiful scopes and they want to go out and scope with it. Even for scoping, you don't want to be fighting the tripod. And that's a big problem with, you know, even for birders or for anybody, it just adds another level of difficulty that shouldn't be there. And just buy a carbon fiber's better, you know, it's lighter weight and it's less vibration. But even a good sturdy aluminum tripod, but don't totally cheap out on a tripod when you buy, and do get a fluid motion video head. And I do like the Benro products. I've used between my wife and I, we've probably got 30 tripods in this house. My wife's also a photographer, and I used them all when I started digiscoping, and I hated them all. It's always the weak link. And I finally did find, I ended up with the Benro video heads, which are fairly inexpensive and they work really, really well.
The other thing is, especially if you're from the digiscoping side of things, is balance as well. So if you're sticking a camera body on the end, you may have to consider getting a slightly longer tripod plate or even a rail, because that can make a big difference to one of the huge problems with digiscoping, and big bugbear for digiscopers is locating the subject is difficult because of the telephoto power. And then thinking that you've got the scope lined up on it, and then having that tiny movement of the video head, and then you'd be way off the subject. So, but if you can get that balance right, so you're balancing the scope and the camera, and you've got a good video head, you'll find that when you do locate the subject, hopefully you will remain on it once you tighten the friction off on the tripod.
Mhm. And this particular Gitzo, again, it's not going to work with the camera, but this one has a counterbalance, a spring set counterbalance that I can set to pull forward, and it more than will compensate for my phone, even the big 11 Pro Max that I'm using. Again, but I'm not shooting with a camera. I don't even own a camera right now, so I'm your phone scope guy. I was talking about earlier the little 553. You can see how little that is. That's our compact scope with fluoride that came up. Here's a good question from Jerry Bonifeld, excuse me. Jerry on Facebook asked a good question, and it's probably worth mentioning. Show quickly about the eye cup when he mounts his phone onto the eye cup, how he's having problems with it collapsing. And it's actually, there's a pretty easy solution to that. Most of these iPhones are designed to work with the eye cup all the way up like this, okay? And if I may, hold on, let me attach the adapter again. I've taken this off. So with this camera and adapter on here, if I mount my camera or my phone like this can rotate down and slip. Mine's pretty tight, so it doesn't do that. But the thing to remember, since these are designed to work most efficiently, generally speaking, depending on which adapter you're using, with the eye cup all the way up, it won't rotate anymore this way. So just change that to be hanging off the left side so that there is no more sag left, if you will, you know, because it's not going to rotate in anymore. So, and vice versa, if you are worried about it down, you know, you could go the other side, but generally speaking, just flopping that over, and probably because you're right-handed, you're putting it on that way and you want the controls over here, but you can indeed just switch it to the other side of the eyepiece and we'll eliminate that problem as a quick fix. Let's see, who's got one queued up? A lot of good ones here.
Yeah, I know, that's what's tough. I mean, there's so much, it could go on forever. It seems like, you know,
Yeah.
that's the
As many as
beauty.
we can.
There's definitely a theme, isn't it? With you know, there's so many questions of digiscoping that
For sure.
people want to know about. You know, it's
I just want to make sure we were giving fair time to the others, since we've done 4 weeks of those too.
Yeah.
We certainly will get to both.
There's Cecil, I think he just look at, I remember, I think saw his warranty stuff come through, just got a scope not too long ago. And he was asking, like, how do you lug around your scope and tripod? And you're doing it with 2 pieces, you're doing it together, you know, is there some kind of pack for that? Or more or less getting some, how you lugging around the field, more or less?
There are, and again, that's going to go back to personal preference and the way you're using it. And as Robert's alluded, I'm a bird watcher first and foremost. So to me, these packs that hold your binoculars hidden inside of a bag, or putting your scope in a bag, is absolutely the last thing in the world I want to do. Because for me, I've got my binoculars at the ready all the time. Even when it's raining, I'll have them on the outside of my my raincoat, you know, and if a bird flies by, you've got mere seconds at times to be able to get on it and get your view. So what I typically do, candidly, in the field, I'll have my legs extended and I carry my scope right over my shoulder like this. I can scan with my binoculars. When I see a bird, I can set this down quickly and put it into motion. Now, I guided for many, many years as a professional guide too. Then there's an expectation that you're going to be quick at getting that bird in the scope and show people the bird that they came to see. So, you know, it's kind of a matter of being at the ready. If that's not as important to you, yes, there's backpacks type things that go in and the leg sticks straight up in the air that I've seen, but those can be problematic because then, you know, you got something over your head and you're going through trails with sticks and branches and it's catching you, trying to pull you over. I've seen slings. There doesn't seem to be a real elegant solution, because the slings, you know, you're whacking the people behind you because your tripod's just spinning back and forth like this back behind you. I've not seen a real elegant solution, and in my many years in the field, from a birding standpoint, at least, I don't see it using them.
Yeah, the one thing though is, most people, you just keep the eyepiece connected to the scope it just keeps dirt out of the inside of everything. And so whatever solution you come up with, keep it together. I'm a backpack guy. Everything that I have with my scope goes into a backpack, but then when I'm in the field, it stays on my tripod and then I just carry it all around. So, but don't disconnect it all the time when you store it or when you're home, or even if you put it in your backpack. The backpack I have, it just fits right in there, protects it. I can travel with it, and then just keep it together all the time.
Yeah. No, I agree. I don't ever take the eyepiece off because generally speaking, you're only going to use the one eyepiece. Back in days gone by, the zooms were not the quality they are today. They were not wide angle. So many people would have a zoom eyepiece that was narrow field and then a wide angle fixed power eyepiece, and you'd switch them back and forth. But so with the advent of these really wonderful fully wide angle zooms, so you get the best of both worlds, the versatility of zoom and the light loss through the zoom has really been, gone to almost nothing. It makes a big difference. So again, I agree with that. Just keep the eyepiece on all the time. We're probably running out of time. One other thing I wanted to throw out quickly while we're on it was a tangent I've forgotten. We haven't mentioned on any of the things, and Robert reminded me earlier, when you talk about video and trying to stay on your subject while you're taking a video, a really important, albeit simple thing that you may not think about is memorize in your head which way to turn the wheel if the bird's getting closer or further away. Because if you can get that to the point where it's intuitive and you don't have to think about that or twist it the wrong way as you're trying to keep your subject in focus, as say a duck swimming on the water towards you, I know that going towards my left hand when I'm behind the scope is going to allow me to focus closer, and twisting towards my right hand or the right barrel of the scope as I'm behind it looking at it, I'm moving the focal point out, because with massive magnification you get a very narrow window of focus from front to back, what's in focus. So you have to move that, especially as you're taking video.
Hey, one quick thing I saw in the chat was about the use of UV filters on the front of the element, and I get that question an awful lot. I have never used UV filters in my 40-year photography career. Yeah. You've got this amazing piece of optic, and then you slap a low quality and even a high quality UV filter. It's going to take away from the quality, in my opinion. So, you just have to be careful with optics, and no matter what it is. So just keep the cap on and just make sure that the front element's always protected. And then when I'm using it, I always keep that lens shade out. So there's a big, there's a 4-inch difference, but protection area between the front element and the front of that, which is another good reason to use that lens shade.
That's a great point.
If I'm sorry, Jeff.
No, and the other thing to that is a lot of times when you have a filter on, you can't, you lose the ability to use your sunshade. So it'll get blocked in tight. So I'm the same way. I've never found that they're very useful, candidly. We make the coatings on these lenses hard and protected, and on that very unlikely opportunity that you do get a scratch, well, send it back to us, we'll fix it for you. But I mean, it's generally speaking, I tend to agree with that school of thought as well, even though we do sell them for those that want them.
I sometimes use the R95mm one for the 880, just on particular sort of on the Welsh coast when it's extremely windy and the sand, and if I'm gonna, I'm spending quite a lot of time there, I'll sometimes put it on just to protect the objective lens, because it's got the dust and dirt repelling coating. Yeah. So that's the only time I.
Rob, let me ask a question with that, because I've not used it. Does that one preclude use of the sunshade then? Or can you still...
because it's actually on the it's not on the scope body itself. It's actually on the
right.
The sunshade.
Yeah, and that's the case with most of them, and that's the other reason I don't like them, because I'm not a fair weather birder. I don't care if it's raining or not, I'm going to go out, and when that gets covered with water, there's nothing you can do. When I'm in the field and it starts to rain, my typical trick is pull this out, I'll loosen this up and rotate the eyepiece so it's pointed down like so. And I'll just kind of tip this down like this so water doesn't get on this lens and on this lens. So again, when I get that, real quick opportunity where I need to see a bird and photograph it, I can just pull this back up, rotate it around, and be looking at the bird without water spotting too. So that's the other reason I'm not a big fan of them.
Yeah. But just something simple like that, I guess, can make all the difference, can't it? Just a few little fieldcraft tips that you pick up like that. Yeah.
Well,
Can I just grab this very quick question? This will take 10 seconds to answer. Robert Allen, it's quite a specific question. PA7 or PZ. It's 1,000mm with a Nikon full frame camera. Basically, go for the PA7. I have tested both PZ and PA7, and the quality is you will not notice any difference. And the thing is, with using a full frame camera on the PZ, you can only use it as 1,000mm. Otherwise, you get vignetting. So go for the PA7.
All right, Jeff.
Yeah.
What's the model of that tripod and video head you're using? Andrew wants to.
That is the Gitzo. It's the Gitzo. It's now called the Traveler tripod, and it's a three piece, and it can fit in my carry-on as is, which is nice. So no matter where I travel all the time. Usually, not this year, but I can have my tripod and my scope with me all the time. So if they lose my luggage and I've got a couple hours when I land, I still have my tools of the trade. And it's the Gitzo is the birder head, they actually call it. It's their fluid pan head with the single twist that controls both pan and tilt. So yeah. Nice.
Well, looking at it, I mean, there's still several questions, and we'll be able to get to those via email as well. I think we should probably go on it for the weekend so everybody can get back out there and enjoy. Rob, thank you for taking the time out of your holiday. I know you're working around the home and joining us.
My pleasure. Yes, yeah.
Enjoy a pint or something, whatever.
6:10 now, so I'm allowed, aren't I? I'm allowed.
Yeah, we are off the clock here. Mr. Wilson, thank you so much. It's always great to hear from you, buddy. I wish we'd all been together here a couple weeks ago over in Ohio, but it wasn't the case. So.
Yeah, I missed it. Yeah, it was too bad, but thanks for these webinars. I enjoy them.
It's the next best thing to be in there, and we appreciate all you folks signing in once again. As a quick reminder, any further questions, you can reach out to us through our Facebook page, Kowa Sport Optics. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/user/Kowa Sport Optics, or you can just go to YouTube and search Kowa Sport Optics, and we have all of our past webinars there, plus about 100 other videos, really high quality videos showing every aspect of our various products. And we'll keep going since we can't be out there with you in the fields at these events. This is the next best thing, and we do appreciate you tuning in. And
we got anything coming down the pipe?
What's that?
You got anything coming down the pipe? Any teasers for upcoming webinars?
Yeah, so in the near future, we're going to have a really interesting talk on the champions of the flyway, with special emphasis on our winning team this year, the Women in Step, which was going to be the first international, fully international all-women's team to compete in the champions of the flyway, which is a big bird race for conservation held in Israel every year. So we'll be talking about that. It was fascinating, and just even the magnitude of the migration in Israel, why it's held there, and why it's such a magical place. Simon Brumby will be coming back in the next few weeks as well, talking to you with more advanced digiscoping techniques. We also have Jared Clark from Newfoundland, who's going to talk to us about birding in Newfoundland with his tour company, Birding the Rock. So we've got a lot of exciting things coming up, and so do stay tuned. We'll keep coming at you Saturdays at noon until people appear like they're no longer interested, maybe, or maybe into perpetuity. We don't know. But thank you again for taking the time, and look forward to seeing all of you in better times out in the field, hopefully.
Yeah, you guys all take care. Have a great weekend. Thanks for
Thanks
joining.
all.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
See you later.